Rain danced against the foggy diner windows as Alina wiped down the last empty table of the evening. The scent of fried eggs and burnt coffee still lingered in the air. It was nearly 11 p.m., and the tired hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed above her like a lullaby she was too anxious to fall asleep to. The tips had been scarce tonight. She tied her brown curls into a loose bun and glanced over at the booth near the corner, the one by the window that always leaked when it stormed. A man had sat there about an hour ago, quite alone, dressed too well for this side of town. He had ordered black coffee and a chicken sandwich, barely touched either. Alina had tried her best to smile, even with sore feet and a headache she couldn't afford medicine for. "Everything all right, sir?" she had asked. He only nodded without looking up. Now the booth was empty. She went over to clean it and paused. There, sitting half-tucked between the cushion and the table, was a black leather wallet. Expensive-looking, her breath caught. She picked it up, heart racing. It was heavy. Inside were crisp $100 bills, way more than she'd seen in a month. A platinum credit card, a driver's license, Ethan Blake. No photo, just a quiet wealth about every item. No receipt, no note. Alina stared at the bills again. Just one could buy her mom's medicine. Two could keep the landlord quiet, all of it. It was more than she dared to dream. Her fingers trembled. For a moment she sat there frozen, the world narrowing around her, rain pounding harder outside. No one would know. The cameras didn't reach this booth. The man might not even remember where he lost it. But then she imagined her mother's voice. "You never lose who you are, no matter what the world takes from you." Alina stood up. She walked straight to her manager's office and handed him the wallet. "Someone left this in booth 6. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to turn that in?" "Looks like a month's rent in there." "I'm sure." He stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll mail it to the address on the license. You did the right thing, kid." Alina forced a smile. "I hope he gets it back." Back in the staff room, she changed into her worn-out jacket. The rain hadn't let up. She didn't have an umbrella, didn't have much of anything, really. But tonight, at least, she had her peace. She stepped out into the stormy night. The wind bit at her skin, and puddles soaked her shoes within seconds. She tightened her coat and started the long walk home, careful not to slip on the slick sidewalk. Her neighborhood was dark. Power outages were common here. The streetlights flickered above the alley where she lived. Her apartment was small, just one room with creaky floorboards, peeling wallpaper, and her mother sleeping peacefully under a thin blanket. Alina tiptoed to the kitchen, boiled water for tea, and checked the medicine drawer. Only one dose left. She sighed, placing the cup on the table and sitting in silence. As she sipped, she thought of the man in the booth, Ethan Blake. She didn't know who he was or where he came from, but she hoped he was home safe and that he'd get his wallet back. What she didn't know was that her simple act of honesty was already on its way to changing her life in ways she couldn't imagine. Because sometimes, the smallest kindness echoes the loudest. The rhythmic ticking of the antique grandfather clock echoed through the vast silence of the penthouse office. The city lights sparkled through the panoramic windows like scattered diamonds, but Ethan Blake didn't notice. He sat still, fingers pressed against his temples, eyes closed. It had been a long day. The board meeting ran overtime. The stock was stable, but the energy was gone from the company, from him. He had once been a man who burned with vision. Now most days he just ran on memory. Soft knock broke the silence. "Come in," Ethan said. His driver, Marcus, stepped in and held up a familiar object. "Sir, this came in the mail from a place called Millstone Diner." Ethan blinked. His wallet, he reached for it, flipping it open. Cash untouched, cards in place, but what caught his eye was a small sticky note tucked behind his license. A simple handwritten message in blue ink. "Found this at your table. Hope it gets back to you safe. Alina, waitress." He read it twice, then a third time. He remembered her now, the young woman who had served him silently, the only person that evening who hadn't looked at him with either fear or formality. It was the night he had driven across town without thinking, ending up at a diner he hadn't been to in decades. His wife used to love it. Before the cancer, before the silence in his house became unbearable. That night, he hadn't even noticed his wallet was missing. He held the note again. There was no phone number, no email, just a name, Alina, and the word waitress. Most people would have taken the cash, or at least the card, but she hadn't touched a thing. Ethan leaned back in his chair. In his world, people didn't give without expecting something in return. Even kindness came with a contract. But this small act of honesty from a stranger pierced through the fog he'd been walking in for months. Marcus cleared his throat. "Should I send her a reward?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, not yet." Marcus looked puzzled but didn't push. Ethan turned back to the city lights. He thought about the way she smiled when she handed him the coffee, the way her hands shook slightly when she placed the plate down. She had looked tired yet composed, struggling maybe but proud. He picked up his phone, typed Millstone Diner into Google Maps and found it again. Open till midnight. He didn't know why he felt the urge to go back, but he did. The next evening, Ethan returned, not in his pressed suit and designer shoes, but in jeans and a plain jacket. No watch, no tie, just a quiet man looking for a coffee. Alina was there, wiping the same counter. He chose the same booth. She looked up as he sat down. Her eyes held the faintest spark of recognition, but she didn't say anything, just offered a smile. "Coffee?" she asked. He nodded. "Black." She poured him a cup, setting it down gently. "You were here the other night, right?" "I was," he said. "I think you left your wallet." "I got it back," he replied, watching her. "Thanks to you." Alina blushed slightly but shrugged. "Didn't do much, just mailed it in." "You could have kept it." "I wouldn't do that," she said simply. Ethan smiled for the first time in days. There was something about her so ordinary yet rare. He didn't introduce himself, not yet. Instead, he asked, "What's your name?" "Alina." "I'm Ethan," he replied. And just like that, a quiet friendship began, born not from wealth or power, but from a simple act of goodness that had found its way back to its source. Ethan returned the next night and the next, and again the night after that. Always the same order. Black coffee, corner booth, quiet presence, always the same waitress, Alina in her plain uniform with soft eyes and a tired but genuine smile. She didn't know who he really was. To her, he was just Ethan, the man with kind eyes and a quiet voice who always left a generous tip, but never in a way that felt like pity. "Long day?" she asked one evening as she placed his usual in front of him. "Something like that," Ethan said, offering a rare smile. "You," she laughed lightly. "Always, but it pays the bills, most of them anyway." He sipped his coffee and studied her, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but as if trying to understand something deeper. "What would you be doing if you weren't here?" She raised a brow. "You mean if I won the lottery or something?" "No," he said. "I mean if things had gone a little differently." Alina wiped her hands on her apron and leaned against the counter. "I was studying finance 2 semesters in. Then my mom got sick. Medical bills don't wait, so I came home, took this job." "You planning to go back?" "I want to," she said quietly, "but dreams are expensive." Ethan nodded, his gaze lowering. He knew that cost. Dreams had once been his currency. Now they felt like debts unpaid. "You're good with people," he said. Alina blinked. "I bring coffee, Mr. Ethan." "You do more than that." She tilted her head. "What about you? What do you do?" He paused. "Retired." She gave him a skeptical look. "You don't look retired," he smiled. "I'm good at hiding it." The conversation shifted then, light and easy. They talked about music, books, rainy weather, the way the city smelled like wet bricks and cinnamon when it stormed. There was a gentleness in their exchanges, no one trying to impress, no one pretending to be more or less than they were. Ethan found himself returning not for the coffee, but for the feeling he carried home after speaking with Alina, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. One night Alina was late for her shift. She came in breathless, hair damp from the drizzle outside. "Everything all right?" Ethan asked from his booth. "Yeah, just had to drop my mom at the clinic. She's been getting worse lately. We're running out of insurance." She forced a smile. "Sorry, I'm rambling. You didn't ask for my life story." "I don't mind hearing it," he said softly. She blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity. "You ever feel like life just paused?" she asked. "All the time." She nodded slowly, as if that shared feeling created a bridge between them. As the night wound down, Alina brought him a slice of pie on the house. "I didn't order this," Ethan said. "I know," she said, smiling. "But you always leave without dessert. That's a crime in my book." He chuckled, tasting the warm cherry filling. It reminded him of his wife. She used to bake the same kind every winter. He didn't say it out loud, but he thought it. "Thank you for reminding me of something good." Before he left that night, he placed a small napkin on the counter. On it, he had scribbled a note. "Sometimes the right people meet at the wrong time so they can help each other find their way back." Alina found it after closing time, read it in silence, and folded it into her pocket. She didn't know who Ethan truly was, but something told her he wasn't just another customer. And somehow, she didn't feel like just another waitress anymore. The diner was quieter than usual, the windows misty with early winter's breath. Ethan entered as he always did, same jacket, same corner booth. But tonight something was different. Alina wasn't there. He waited silently, sipping coffee that didn't taste quite right. After 20 minutes, he asked the cook behind the counter, "Is Alina off today?" The man shook his head. "No show. First time that's happened in months. Hope everything's okay." Ethan nodded, heart heavy. He stood to leave but paused at the door. Something tugged at him, a voice in his mind that sounded like his late wife. "Don't let silence answer your questions." That night he made a call. The next morning, Ethan's assistant, Claire, handed him a thin manila file. Inside was a summary report, basic information he'd quietly requested. Alina Ruiz, 22, part-time student, paused, employed at Millstone Diner, lives in a modest apartment on the east side. Primary caregiver to her mother, Carmen Ruiz, currently admitted to a small public hospital with complications from kidney failure. No debts, no complaints, no scandals, just a quiet girl carrying too much. Ethan stared at the document longer than he needed to. Then, without telling anyone, he made a discreet bank transfer to the hospital's billing department. Anonymous, untraceable. He didn't want praise, just peace. 3 days later, Alina returned to the diner, her steps slower than usual, eyes weary but bright. Ethan was already seated. She froze when she saw him, then offered a shy smile. "Hey, I didn't think you'd still be coming in." "I like the pie," he said, grinning. She chuckled, the sound soft but real. "I'm sorry I disappeared," she said, pouring his coffee. "My mom had to be admitted suddenly. I didn't have the money for it. I was so scared." He looked at her carefully. "Is she all right?" "She's stable now. Miraculously, someone paid part of the bill. The hospital wouldn't tell me who. I cried when I found out. I wish I could thank them." Ethan looked down. "Maybe some people just believe you deserve a little kindness." She blinked, sensing something behind his words, but let it go. Later that evening, as the diner emptied out, Alina approached Ethan with an envelope. "I wanted to give you this." He opened it and found a simple thank you card. "I don't know how much you know or what you've done," she said carefully, "but I know you care and I'm grateful." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket and slid it toward her. Inside was a typed letter and a glossy brochure. She opened it slowly. The letter read, "Dear Alina, what you did, returning that wallet, reminded me that honesty and integrity still exist in a world too focused on what it can take. You gave without asking. Let me give something back." Enclosed is an offer to begin online finance classes, fully funded, flexible hours, optional mentorship. If you accept, I'll personally support your journey. No strings, just belief in someone who deserves more. Sincerely, E.B. She looked up, eyes wide. "E.B., you're Ethan Blake, the co." "Yes," he said softly, "but right now I'm just someone who believes you're meant for something greater than this diner." Alina stared at him, the edges of her world reshaping all at once. "I can't accept this," she whispered. "Yes, you can," he replied, "because you earned it before you ever knew who I was." Tears welled in her eyes. She sat down across from him, voice trembling. "Why me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because when I was lost, you helped me feel found." For the first time in a long while, neither of them felt like they were carrying the weight of the world alone. The months that followed felt like waking up inside a dream Alina never thought she was allowed to have. Mornings were still hard. She still made coffee runs, took care of her mother's pills, and helped her walk around the apartment when her legs ached. But now something was different. Possibility had taken root in her life. 3 nights a week, Alina attended virtual finance classes through the scholarship Ethan had arranged. He never hovered, never bragged. He simply left space and support for her to grow. She insisted on keeping her job at the diner. "This place reminds me where I came from," she said, "and who I'm doing this for." Ethan respected that. He continued to visit the diner, though now their interactions were more relaxed, filled with laughter and a quiet understanding that few people ever find. One rainy night, as the diner emptied out, Alina poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from Ethan without being asked. I got an A on my first financial modeling project, she said, grinning. Of course you did, he smiled back. I almost cried, thought maybe I wasn't smart enough to go back, but I remembered what you said, that belief is a kind of fuel. He nodded. The world needs more people like you in boardrooms. She laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I still trip over my own shoelaces. Ethan paused, looking out the window at the streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. Can I tell you something? Always. I had a daughter. Alina's smile faded gently. She waited. She's 24 now. We were close once. After her mom passed, I buried myself in work, forgot how to talk to her, forgot how to grieve properly. Do you still talk to her? Text sometimes, birthdays, holidays, but we're strangers now, and I think it's my fault. Alina didn't say anything right away. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. You're not the only one who's ever let silence grow too loud, she said, but it's never too late to speak again. He swallowed, the lump rising in his throat. I think meeting you reminded me how to listen, he said softly, and how to try again. That night he went home and drafted an email to his daughter, not as a CEO, but as a father. Weeks passed. Alina's confidence grew. Her professors noticed. Her classmates admired her insights. One even asked her to join a group project on sustainable banking, and her eyes lit up like they hadn't in years. At home, Carmen grew stronger too. The new medication helped, and while her illness hadn't disappeared, hope returned to their tiny apartment like sunlight after a long winter. One morning, Alina arrived at the diner to find her manager waiting by the door. There's a guy in a suit inside, says he's from Blake Corp, wants to interview you for an internship. Alina blinked. What? He said someone on the board recommended you. I don't know what you've been doing, but keep doing it. Inside, a woman with a warm smile and a tablet greeted her. Miss Alina Ruiz, you've been nominated for a junior finance internship at Blake Corp headquarters. Would you like to proceed? Alina's heart pounded. She thought of the night she returned that wallet, the night that changed nothing and somehow changed everything. She looked out the window and saw Ethan across the street, leaning against a car, watching quietly. She didn't wave. She smiled. Because some stories don't need an audience to be beautiful. They just need truth, timing, and a little kindness. A year later, the world looked completely different for Alina Ruiz. She still passed the old diner sometimes. The chipped windows, the squeaky door, the corner booth where everything began. But she no longer wore an apron or carried a notepad. Now she carried a laptop, a confidence she had earned, and a key card to the Blake Corp headquarters, clipped proudly to her blazer. She had not just joined the company, she had climbed, slowly, steadily, from intern to junior financial analyst. Not because she was Ethan Blake's project, but because she worked harder than anyone in her unit. No shortcuts, no favors. That was her one condition. Ethan respected that. Their friendship remained quiet but strong, like family you don't see every day but always carry in your heart. One afternoon, after a presentation that earned her team their first big client, Alina was asked to attend the annual company awards gala. Nervous but excited, she put on a navy blue dress her mother helped her pick out. Carmen, now walking on her own and smiling more than ever, kissed her forehead before she left. You're going to light up the room, Mija, she said. Just be you. At the gala, the hall sparkled with chandeliers and soft music. Executives mingled in tuxedos, glasses clinked, and applause echoed for each award given. Alina sat near the back, still not quite used to red carpets and high heels. Then the host tapped the mic. This year's final remarks will be delivered by our retiring CEO, Mr. Ethan Blake. The room erupted in applause. Ethan stepped onto the stage, wearing a simple suit and the same calm smile Alina had known from the diner. Good evening, he began. Tonight isn't about endings. It's about beginnings, about people who rise not because they were lifted but because they chose to stand. He paused, his gaze scanning the crowd until it rested on Alina. A while back, he continued, I lost something. Not just a wallet, but a sense of trust in the world. And someone I didn't know, a waitress in a small diner, returned it to me without asking for anything in return. That act, as small as it seemed, reminded me that character still matters, that kindness isn't weakness, and that some of the most brilliant minds are hidden in plain sight. The audience sat in hushed silence. That woman is now part of this company, he said, and her name is Alina Ruiz. The spotlight swung toward her. Stunned, Alina stood up slowly, met by a sea of applause. She didn't cry. She smiled and held her head high. Later, Ethan approached her as the crowd mingled. He looked different, lighter, like a man who had finally forgiven himself. "I hope I didn't embarrass you," he said. "You made me sound like a hero." "You are." She looked at him warmly. "What will you do now that you're stepping down?" He shrugged. "Travel, volunteer, maybe, right, and spend time with someone important." She tilted her head. "My daughter," he said. "We've been having lunch every Sunday." Alina's eyes softened. "That's beautiful. She asked about you, by the way. Wants to meet the girl who returned a wallet and rebuilt a man." Alina laughed. But as she stepped out into the cool night, her heels clicking softly on the pavement, she passed a cafe on the corner. At a table outside sat a young man, panicked, checking his pockets. She walked by, then paused. On the chair behind him sat a worn brown wallet. She picked it up, tapped his shoulder, and said, "Looking for something?" The man exhaled with relief. "I thought I lost everything." She smiled gently. "Sometimes losing something brings you to exactly where you're meant to be."